Hey everybody, it's Phil here. Conrad's not joining us today, just me. I got the new hair. We're going to be doing Death and Narratives podcast, just kind of random shotgun blast of some random topics and some stuff that's reflecting on some things that have happened in my life. So let's get into it. All right, so first thing, I just want to relay a story that or not even a story really at all, just something I was thinking about because I go to this gym called Power Build, which is it's basically like whatever people who sign up for Planet Fitness think a gym is, that's what this gym actually is. It's just like insane people on steroids, grunting all the time, and a lot of there's lifting competitions there. All the plates are metal and shit. And I don't know why I chose that. It's either that or the YMCA around here. And I was like, oh, dude, an actual gym. It's definitely a trip. It's definitely filled with freaks and geeks and goblins and goons. They're all usually nice people, but just this area that I'm in Bucks County. It's quite wealthy area of Pennsylvania, very type A sort of white people around here. And I just gotta say, not that any of these people have personally done anything bad to me at all, but it's just, and these actually, they're nice people, they're fit people, I people watch them, I overhear their conversations, they seem fairly well adjusted, but there is this sort of Americanized nationalism and sort of faux patriotism and police support that is really weird out here. I know, since BLM happened, there's been this sort of get rid of the police, I support the police kind of disposition. And a lot of people are I support the police out here, which is crazy to me in America. The idea of policing, that's another question, I think, for me. But the American police are pretty horrible. But that's just from my perspective, having been attacked by chemical warfare by them. But yeah, I go there and I've just been looking at people's t-shirts basically, and I've just been collecting a mental Rolodex of the most disgusting t-shirts that I've ever seen. One guy had on a lacrosse league Buckingham County Police Blue Lives Matter shirt. Now that's I don't know, that's so hate-inducing for me. Maybe it doesn't translate to a lot of people, but lacrosse around the Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia, sort of mid-Atlantic area is sort of a sport that has this connotation of elite prep school, white, high class, but also just the children of those people. So these very vulgar, horrific people who would become senators and become Epstein class and will become leaders of their frats and haze people and then become leaders of their board of trustees and extort people and then leaders of the country and who will do sexual crimes to minors. And it starts there. It starts at the lacrosse league, that sort of mentality, this sort of brutal, sort of disgusting American imperial white mentality starts. It's in the lacrosse leagues. I don't know how to get that across to someone who doesn't live here, but it's very much in there. And to mix that with the police, that's just a whole nother level, that was an insane shirt. I never thought I would see levels of cringeness at that level, but I saw that. And then the other day, this is something you see a lot in America. For maybe our non-American listeners, they won't necessarily understand this, but there is this sort of patriotism. This guy was wearing a shirt. It was like, had a huge bald eagle and like all this like text and stuff, and said, we support the troops. America has this fetishization of saying they support our troops, even though like every very successful presidential campaign since George Bush has pretty much been predicated on saying we're going to end these wars, but people still hate the wars, kind of, but like support the troops. It's this weird contradictory thing, but and we think like the troops are all good and that they are the government's just doing the bad things and they're making the troops do the bad things. And we do treat our veterans horribly here, and it is sad because most of those people are just poor people who didn't want to join the military. They just wanted to get an education and have a bed to sleep on and a free meal. And quite frankly, they're oftentimes tricked into joining the military, saying they'll get huge signing bonuses, they'll get a car or whatever. So I sympathize with that. People in the military are treated horribly in America. They're sleep deprived. They're basically tortured during the training. They're humiliated. They're hazed, and they end up having to do that to each other too. So it's this very weird form of camaraderie through trauma, but also like continual backstabbing. And people in Fort Bragg, they oftentimes kill each other. They're doing drug dealing, they're raping each other. You don't want to be stationed in certain forts in America if you are a female soldier. So it's a very contentious and horrible place to be, and I do feel bad for people who've been tricked into that. But at the same time, so many people have this weird American pastiche where they say, of course we support the troops. What are you, an anti-American, Chinese, communist little faggot? I sort of used to have a sympathy for that in a way because of, all the things I said about how horrible it would be to just mistakenly join the military at, 18 years old, which is what happens a lot of the time. But more and more, especially following the Iran war, more and more, I think how can we support the troops? This is so asinine. How can we support what these people are doing, wittingly or unwittingly? How can we, I just see this guy wearing a, I support the troops shirt, and I'm just thinking, in what way? In what capacity? What do they do that you support? Tell me that. Please tell me that. Can you articulate what they do that you support? That's just crazy to me because most Americans, they just don't know. That's just the plain and simple thing. They just don't know. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're saying that they support. It's crazy. It is crazy. I know people won't understand this in other countries who see the death and destruction in America and see some Americans are really against these wars, but then there is still this contradictory sense of their pride and nationalism will still supersede that, somehow. And we support the troops. We don't support the wars or the politicians or whatever, but we support the troops, So, the troops are the ones doing the genocides. They're getting orders, but they're still doing it. So I can't accept that. I just can't try and wrap my brain around that anymore. As an American, it's very hard for me seeing the death and destruction that happened at the Minaj school, the death and destruction that continues to happen in Gaza. And when you have people like Anthony Aguilar who actually are in the military or contracted for these things and go, you know what, no, I'm not going to do this. This is a war crime. and the fact that there's not that many of those people, But yeah, to get back to this point, nobody really knows in America what the U.S. military actually does. I know that can be hard for someone in Brazil, in Iran, in even France to understand, but no one really actually knows. A vast majority of people, 80% of Americans, really don't know what we're doing. They have no clue. If they knew, they'd be horrified probably, and they'd never support it. But they're stupid and they don't look into it. And for most people, they never will because they sort of unconsciously maybe know it's something bad. But they don't know who we're fighting. They don't know why we're doing it, and they don't know where they are and what capacity they're doing the fighting. They don't know that. I now relay a story. I was in Washington State. I was farming there for about a year. I broke my ankle skating, unfortunately, which sucked in the middle of the farming season. And this is how horrible American healthcare is. There was a clinic, not a hospital, but like a clinic with an x-ray and people on this island that I was at. But they closed at a certain time. So they're like, we can't take you, And I don't think they took my insurance. So they wouldn't take me there, even though it was just down the road. So then they said, okay, you have to get on a ferry. So the ambulance on this island drove me to the ferry landing. I paid for a ticket, got on the ferry, got off of the ferry, paid for an Uber to go to a hospital, which was like half shut down because I don't know, America is just halfway towards a zombie apocalypse at this point. That's what everything looks like. It's just like half abandoned and barely working, staffed by 4 people. It's like huge hospital. Weird stuff. But on that Uber ride there to the hospital from the ferry landing, which mind you, I got just one x-ray for them to tell me that my ankle was broken, and they didn't even give me a cast. They put me in a splint, and that wasn't in my insurance network, so I had to pay like $1,500 to just get an x-ray and for them to tell me that my ankle was broken, which I knew, so thanks for that, American healthcare system. Anyway, the Uber driver there, he was from I don't remember where he's from, but he had served at the base. There's a large naval base, I believe, at Whidbey Island, which is sort of close to the island I was farming on, Lopez Island, in Washington State, upper west-hand corner of Washington State, upper west, northwest corner of America, pretty much. And Whidbey Island is a place where they have been testing out FA-18E growlers. Maybe the military people will correct me on that. This sort of new plane that I think the Navy bought a bunch of, which is supposed to phase out an earlier plane. A lot of them with electronic warfare, jamming, whatever, etc. So they would always fly, and then we'd be farming, they'd fly, all the time. Horrible noise. But they'd fly over us because we didn't have that many people, on the island. So they were like, oh, it would be better than Seattle. They'll complain. They got money and cachet, so we'll fly over these islands. So we were very familiar with them, and I do believe that they did launch operations. They do launch operations. It's a naval base, but there's a lot of air assets there, and a lot of them go from that naval base in Whidbey Island over the Pacific Ocean towards the Asian theater, Indo-PACOM, probably on to, Diego Garcia and places of the like as well. So that's where we were. Those are the people we're dealing with. That's the state of America, which is those things are everywhere pretty much. The guy was saying how, we were just having a conversation about the Syrian war, I think, because at the time, Mohammed al-Jolani, who was, a.k.a. Mohammed Shara, I guess, or Ahmad al-Shara, I think is his name, his pseudonym, but his name is Mohammed al-Jolani, even though that's probably not his real name, but he is the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which rebranded a couple times. What were they before that? I can't remember. They were HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and then Jabhat al-Nusra before that. And before that, they were ISIS. He was the viceroy of ISIS, the second, basically, to Muhammad al-Baghdadi. Muhammad Baghdad al-Baghdadi, I think is his name. Sorry. A lot of jihadi names, a lot of Wahhabi jihadist names that I don't fully remember. But before that, they were part of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Which is to say, this guy that America and the United Kingdom backed basically was a splinter cell from Al-Qaeda. He's an ISIS Al-Qaeda dude. And he was framed as sort of this moderate rebel who's going to replace Assad, who's an authoritarian and horrible person because he did chemical warfare in one protest. He used CS gas against protesters, which happened to me in America. So if we were applying the same standard, we'd have, some revolution here that would be backed by China, but we don't apply the same standards. So that guy, this ISIS, the head chopper in chief, just assumed the presidency of Syria, walked into Damascus, and claimed it at the time. And I was saying how crazy this was, and the guy was saying how he, served at the naval base and how I think they stationed operations for that. The occupation of northern Syria, as well as Operation, what is called Timber Sycamore, I believe one of the most expensive operations of CIA history, where they were funding and arming and equipping these sort of moderate rebels, or at least some cutouts on these moderate rebels, which eventually fell, and then all this money and logistics and weaponry and training sort of was training facilities were somehow taken over. Somehow it got into the hands of the bad guys, but they're against Assad, so we'll back them, and this is ISIS, right? Al-Qaeda. Jabhat al-Nusra Front, Hayat al-Sham. Now the Syrian government, that's what they are. I mean, that's how crazy it is. So it's just crazy. I was just talking to the guy about this, and Jake Sullivan's leaked email, Hillary Clinton just saying AQ is on our side in Syria. Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. This is just nuts. It wasn't that long ago that he was invited to the White House. He's in the White House. He was like at a friggin' Knicks game or something. Listening to like Beyonce play. That happened. Like something like that. I don't know. He was at some sports game listening to some like. Some music that he would probably pull someone's toenails out for playing if he was back in Damascus. But anywho, it's just crazy. It's just crazy to me. I was talking with this dude about it because, he was talking about, they probably staged operations in Syria, and he was just telling me, and this is the state of people in America, not just the state of people in America who, I support the troops, the state of people in the military themselves. He was saying, well, I don't really know who we're fighting, but I just know they're the bad guys. Oh, I had to crack my neck for that one. This is how asinine it is. They don't know who, and I to a certain extent, I understand why they don't know. It's because it's fucking confusing, because the information space has been flooded with disinformation. Remember how I tried to remember Hayat al-Sham, Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS splinter cell, Al-Qaeda, Viceroy General. I mean, they're rebranding, they're continually renaming, they're continually flooding the information space to confuse you so that you can't follow what's happening. That's why a lot of stuff in the Middle East is so confusing, because you're like, the Kurds? Who's the Kurds? What is Baluchistan? Wait, is that a country? No. What is, this random Shia militia? I've never heard of SAD, Who is Ansar Allah? What, are they the Houthis? They're just, everything's renamed, everything's put in weird borders, everything's named a terrorist that is a freedom fighter, and everything that's a freedom fighter is named a terrorist, and everything that's a state actor is named a non-state actor, and everything's a non-state actor is named a state. It's confusing. It's very confusing, but that's on purpose. But people who fight in the military, who launch jets towards this region, who coordinate forces, they're not just the cooks. They're not just the guy that's like, because everybody who joins the military, in America, they so stupidly, they idiotically think, well, I'm just going to go over there, but I'm just going to be a cook, I'm just going to get my degree. I'm going to be a cook. I'm going to come out, with a nice little pension. I'm going to get VA benefits. They think they're going to join the military without actually sacrificing anything and getting all the benefits. No, brother. No, brother. That's not how it works. And that's very rare. It's very rare that you get a nice cushy job like that. You're going to be on some naval base, for 2-3 years at the very least. Not able to leave or else you'll get court-martialed. And yeah, you're going to have to be working like 12-hour days eating slop. Yeah, probably getting hazed and tortured by, your drill sergeants and your sergeants and your higher-ups, and overworked and underpaid, and they'll make you pay for your travel to go to different parts of the U.S. military installations. And you'll probably get addicted to drugs. They'll probably do some experimental medical things to you, You'll probably have everlasting medical damage. And that's if you don't get deployed somewhere, forward deployed, That's if you're not in the shit. That's the good. That honestly might be the best case scenario. God forbid you're in the Navy and you get put on a ship. I mean, look at the Gerald Ford people. Christ almighty. You don't want to be there. That's a prison. That's worse than a prison. So it's horrible. People they don't understand this when they join the American military. They don't understand what they're doing, and they don't understand who we're fighting. They don't understand why we're fighting it. But not only to that extent, they're not in the weeds of like, oh, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi versus al-Jolani. He switched. He turned, the ISIS in the northern Syria and switched it, and then he had a splinter cell cut off from that, and because the Americans kind of betrayed him and took him out, and now he's sort of the guy, but he got rebranded, to Jabhat al-Nusra Front, which is sort of a nicer name in English, and the PBS did they did a interview with him, and they put him in a suit, so they're trying to make him look like a statesman, but whatever. But it's like it's not that they don't know all of that. They don't understand maybe they know what ISIS is, but they don't even know what Hayat al-Sham is. So they don't know who Assad is. I'll say it. I mean, there's a lot of people on that naval base, I'm sure of it. I would bet money they have never heard of the name Assad. I'm sure of it. I've talked to some of these people. They don't know what Hezbollah is. They don't know what Ansar Allah is. They don't know. I mean, they don't know. They don't know. They are trapped somewhere on some base, on some ship, sleep deprived of food and nutrition, of light sometimes, and they're forced to get up and work an 8, 10, 12-hour day and shout out a radio commission every time they see a blip. And they have no clue what they're doing. And they don't know what that radio blip is. And they just think it's the bad guys. And we have to shout it out so that a cram gun can obliterate it. When it's probably just a refugee boat from Lebanon trying to get some supplies into Gaza. I mean, this is a real example that I've heard people talk about. They're stationed on a naval boat. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know who they're fighting. They don't know. It's so insane to me that could be possible. But I guarantee you, for the vast majority of Americans, it's not only probable, it's the case. And it's only viable for the American military to function with that being the case. Because if they know there's only a few true believers, and they're in like Delta Force, they're all the special forces, special operations guys that, get hired to do all the Jeffrey Epstein security after they're done. Those are the only people who really believe in the mission of America, which is rape, pillage, piracy, all around the world. And they're given sort of a green light to do that themselves too, So those are the only people. The infantrymen, the navalmen, the naval sea officers, like they don't. People in the military, maybe higher ups in the Air Force, sort of understand this, because they're more ghoulish and they just like fly a plane and drop bombs on schoolgirls, But the people on the ground, they really don't understand. They don't understand, and it's by design. But this guy, he said, well, we're, this Uber driver, but I think we're fighting the bad guys there. Brother, you gave 5 to 10 years of your life. He did a lot of time. And you don't know who you're killing. It boggles the mind. It really does. I mean, I work at this job, and this job is, some billionaire finances it, and that's one of those things that, I'm sure the farm director's like, hey, if you hate billionaires, you don't want to work at this job, because he's doing a good thing, blah, blah, blah. All right. Me personally, just the way I am, I'm immediately looking him up on LinkedIn, looking him up on his Wikipedia, seeing, all right, does he have any Epstein connections? Is this really just some guy doing some nice foundation charity work? Seems like it is for now. It seems above board, But for me personally, I have to know. Because I will not be complicit, period, at all. I mean, I haven't, gone to the Pentagon and, tried to, tackle Pete Hegseth yet, and, take him hostage or whatever. So, technically, I am still very complicit. I'm an American who hasn't taken up arms and, overthrown the Epstein class, I want to, but I also go, what is me just doing that going to do when no one else does it, But, then again, you look at someone like Luigi, that makes an impact, even though if it was just him. That makes an impact. But so in that way, I'm still very complicit. But for me personally, as I like to say, and I said this to a girl I was seeing one time, and I think outwardly she was like, no, that's very valiant, but you could tell that I think she judged me for this because a lot of people around me and my peers I went to Drexel University, sort of an engineering STEM school in Philadelphia, and a lot of these people became Raytheon, Boeing engineers in the military-industrial complex. And I told her, look, I will never do that. I will rather work a dead-end job at 7-Eleven my whole life and have the most miserable existence than have a nice economic time, because I like suffering, but also because I have morals. But I have pride. I have this pride, which is great and bad, very bad. Pride's the 7th deadly sin. But Iran has pride. Right now they're not going to take the Americans, right? So sometimes it works in your favor to have this strong-headed pride that you will never cede to your death. And a lot of people are having that now with Israel, but I have pride. I will never, ever work for Raytheon. I will always, if it came down to that, getting a job at Raytheon and having a much nicer life, economically speaking, versus being destitute and kind of, poverty, living paycheck to paycheck, which I'm doing now, to be honest with you, even though I have a nice home and food's provided on this farm, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck, See, I'm stuffed up. I think I have sleep apnea. My father has sleep apnea. I'm trying to get some sort of medical treatment for that. Just had to pay $2,000 to $2,500 for that. That's 2 of my paychecks right there. So the whole month, I'm not really going to be spending much money, which thankfully is possible because I had this housing and the food. But if that wasn't possible, I'd be either suffering more in the sleep, And sleep deprivation does it to you, let me tell you, Suffering more or just be in continual debt, Continual debt. So, I mean, that's already where I am at to an extent, But I always told myself, and it's not even just about telling myself, it's something I know deep down in the core of my body. I will never trade having let's just be honestly, too, a slightly cushier life, being able to, I don't have to, do backbreaking labor for 2 weeks to afford this thing. I can just buy it. Trade that for, being not only just complicit in an organization funding genocides with its weaponry and its money and its logistics, but probably literally making the things possible, the physical instruments necessary for those genocides. Me personally, I will never do that. Ever. 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 If it comes down to it, I will die. That's the line, for me. I think me and Conrad talked about this, and a lot of people are saying this now. Outwardly, this is a crank opinion, but a lot of people are saying, if they have a draft for this war, and they come for me, and they're trying to make me fight for the Israelis, I'm going to start blasting. I will not die for Israel. I will die to not die for Israel. That's where I'm at. Not a lot of people are like that in America. They don't know abject poverty. Even the abject poverty here is so much better than abject poverty in other places because there's so much surplus and excess. A poor person here can do some dumpster diving and find a bunch of food that people just throw out every day. A poor person in another country, they're just going to starve. There's no excess food, So they're not, they haven't experienced that, and they're so afraid of experiencing a modicum of poverty, which is understandable. It's understandable. People have to make a living. They have to live a certain standard of living that they think they're promised, And who wouldn't pick the job that pays them the most, that they have to do the least amount of manual backbreaking labor for, that they got educated to do in some sense? Most people are going to pick that job, but they're only insofar as they're just not going to think about the fact that they are fueling and building the tools for genocidal, maniacal, evil, imperialist, Epstein class, syndicate type individuals and situations and foreign engagements. It is dependent on their work. People don't put that together, and a lot of people in America, they have the craziest cognitive dissonance you could ever think of. People in the military industrial complex, and it pervades all throughout. My sister almost, she works in the airlines, and she almost was like, yeah, I want to get a new job. She's working for United or something, either American or United, I can never remember. And she almost was like, I want to work for another airline. And she was like, yeah, I'm thinking about, I can't remember what Israel's one is, but is it Israeli Air or something like that? But she was like, yeah, I was thinking about Israeli Air. This was a year or two before October 7th, I believe. So I told her, and there's only a few times where I'm very unabashed, because you start to just talk about your political opinions in America as a rational person, and people go, well, that's crazy, you're a crank, stop, you're being weird, So I've learned to limit it, and even then people still think I'm just spouting crazy shit all the time, even though I'm being rational and they're being crazy. But that was a time where I was like, listen to me very carefully. If you take that job and you go and have to live in Israel and have to do logistics for Israeli airlines, that will be one of the worst decisions of your life. That airline may not exist in a number of years. You may be trapped in Israel somewhere. Do you understand? That is one of the most violent places in the world. Do not take that job, Said in very uncertain terms, in very certain terms. What's the phrase? In no uncertain terms, I told her. I think, I don't know if she in the moment paid it much credence, but I think upon reflection, she understood what I was saying, even though she's not very politicized. I think everybody more and more is hating Israel, and I think that was a good move. Look at what's happened now. Not a lot of flights were getting in and out of Israel during the 44-day war. Not a lot of flights getting in and out during the 12-day war. In fact, they actually paused all flights, even though they could have done some civilian flights out to Greece and whatnot, because they didn't want everyone to flee, because everyone's going to be leaving that country. So definitely made the right decision. They made the right call for her to inform her about that, and she made the right decision to not pursue that, thankfully. But this is how people think. They don't really, they think, oh, it's more money, in Israel, that's a country, maybe there's some whatever, but, they're legit, They don't really think like, whoa, hold on. What does Israel actually do as a culture, society, people, nation with no defined borders? What does Ben Gurion Airport do? Not all civilian things, that's for sure. There's a lot of military stuff going on at Ben Gurion Airport, okay, so which is probably where you'd be at, Therefore, it's a target. It is a legal military target. At least part of the airport is. So think about that. Same with a lot of American airports too. People don't really realize that. It's not like other countries. Other countries, there are civilian airports and military airports. Not in the West. All of this civilian infrastructure has been molded and blended in this sort of private, what's this, PPP, right? The private public partnerships, and a lot of civilian infrastructure dual functions as military infrastructure under the noses of civilians who think it's just civilian things, And one of these days, some of those things are going to explode. People are going to go, oh my God, why would they hit us, civilians, Like what's happening in the Gulf states right now. Why are they hitting hotels? It's not like there's a CIA base here. There's Mossad agents who have a secret, tunnel under here that, and now you sound like Israelis. Because it's all projection, right? Everything they say about Hamas, oh, they have human shields, they use human shields, and we have to destroy this civilian infrastructure because there's a Hamas civilian tunnel. It's like, what do you think the Mossad does, bro? They got towers in the middle of Tel Aviv. They have anti-aircraft batteries, it's just like within traffic, you know what I mean? Like it's just in between like a heavily packed street in Tel Aviv. They have don't they have like a mall built on top of like this huge Mossad compound that's like underground? Like they are the ones that do human shields. They were using hotels and stuff to house soldiers and officers, and they had all these CIA and Mossad safe houses sort of nestled inside or underneath some of these places, so it's all projection on their part, but this is a real thing, and people don't understand it. People in America, the West, they don't understand it's real. Instead, they're just sort of, following the incentives, basically, this sort of careerism that's happened in America, and that happens in the military. It's careerism. It's, well, how can I make money, How can I get an education? How can I get to the top of this place? And people just, they just don't really think about morally what they're actually doing or what's actually going on, because they're just following the incentives, But me personally, if I've ever worked in one of those places, I'd have to know. I'd have to have a modicum of knowledge. Not just go down the rabbit hole as I do, but just a modicum of knowledge. Who owns this? Who are they? How do they operate? Why would they do this? What's the point of this? Am I being instrumentalized for something? And realistically, dude, all it takes is just looking up somebody's LinkedIn or somebody's Wikipedia. That's really all it takes. Let's just be honest. Like, most of the times these people self-snitch, Most of the times, if you think, oh man, this guy running a protest movement, he seems like some weird, Fed or something. Look up his LinkedIn. He probably worked at the Department of Defense. That's happened to me, personally. That's happened to me multiple times. Why is this dude who runs the community garden weird? Oh, he works at the State Department. Okay, that's weird. That's freaky. You don't want to get too schizophrenic, but, this stuff happens, man. This stuff happens at very low levels. It happens at every level. You join the military, you join a consultant agency, you're in a small socialist organization in Philadelphia. there's going to be bad people in there. You need to understand them, who they are, what their history is, what the organization does, what they've done, what you're producing. You need to be conscious of these things. You can't just be like, oh, no, they do this, and I want to do this. So, speaking of which, let's go to a story that I want to talk about. I know we're already 40 minutes in on the self one, so I'm always like, oh, what am I going to say on this one? And then it's like 45 minutes later. I'm like, all right, let's get to the first topic. But let's look at this dude. Well, let's look at this first. CNN. U.S. Navy Secretary Felon fired as naval blockade of Iran continues. So they fired the Secretary of the Navy probably because he was saying some of these... He's probably pushing back on some of the insane things Trump and Hegseth were trying to do. And Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said Wednesday evening that Felon would be departing effective immediately. A surprise announcement that came even while the U.S. Navy is carrying out a blockade of Iranian ports during a ceasefire in the Iran war. So Hegseth had a conversation with Trump and informed Felon he needed to resign to be fired. Two sources familiar with the matter said. So, this is where we're at now, where Trump is getting so deranged, and it's funny, it's usually the other way around. Usually it's the president has some modicum of sanity because he's a civilian, or a politician who's thinking of like popularity, You guys a modicum of sanity and is going to say, hey, this war seems kind of crazy. Maybe we shouldn't do it. Maybe that'd be bad for the economy and my popularity ratings and yada, yada, yada. And you have the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the people from the Pentagon, Secretary of the Navy and Army, whatever, and go, no, sir, you have to do this because blah, 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 blah. And they're lying to him, basically. Now it's the other way around. Now it's the president telling the Secretary of the Navy, you have to blockade this insane, huge area with 3 carriers, two of which probably basically don't work right now, running on fumes. And during a ceasefire, which is an act of war, therefore violating a ceasefire, probably do piracy on some Chinese-owned vessels, which would maybe ignite World War III. And the Secretary of the Navy is going, sir, we can't do that. Logistically, morally, international law, legally wise, we can't do that. And he's going, well, if you can't do that, you're fired. And it's gotten to the point where, we're reaching Xi Jinping levels of purges now, They have fired, a lot of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I think the number was like 8 or something now. 9 with Felon. I'm sure it's up to 10, 11, 12, 13 soon. He's going through people. Where does the buck stop? Because it's either going to be someone in I was going to say the interagency, but not the interagency even. Someone in the Pentagon is going to have to tell him no. No, you're not doing this. You're not firing me. You're fired. You're going to be impeached. You're going to be 25th Amendmented. And we're going back to sanity. And we're going to pull out of Iran and do some sort of deal and capitulate and make sure it looks somehow as good as we can spin it, because this is getting so far out of control that we're at the precipice of a nuclear war. And it was speculated that the reason why Iran went to the table for the last round of talks, the ceasefire, was because Trump allegedly wanted the nuclear codes. And General Raisin Kane was like, no, I'm not going to give that to you. So that's where we're at. The world depends on the peaceful and sage wisdom of the Pentagon higher brass to stop nuclear war. How insane is that? Usually it's the world depending on people not listening to those people in the Pentagon to prevent nuclear war. Now it's those people going, whoa, that's too crazy. And these are people who did the Iraq war. So, these are people who did, 9/11. That's how far we've gotten. So Trump is so deranged now, he's having to fire those people. He fired this guy Felon Secretary of the Navy. Let's get rid of that one. And now let's just look up this guy. This guy is Hung Kao. He's the Undersecretary of the Navy. So what's his deal? What's happening with him? Let's just read a little bit about this guy because I think it's so emblematic of who these people are and who rises to the top, basically, and the sycophants that may or may not, replace a regular armyman who's like, no, this is crazy, we can't do this, and who's going to replace that person and be like, yes, sir, we'll do that, of course. Let's look at this guy. Hung Kao was born in 1971 in Saigon, South Vietnam. Okay, so this man was born not an American. He was born by the collaborationist government of South Vietnam. It was one of those guys that got out. Okay, so you know what this reminds me of? This is like the EU being NATO-ified and taken over by Kaja Kallas and all these people from Estonia. Not anyone from the UK or France or Spain, taken over from these tiny proxy nations that we've turned into proxies against Russia, and they're the most fervent. This guy is probably one of the most fervent anti-communists because he came from the South Vietnamese, could have been South Korean, whatever. He came from the South Vietnamese collaborationist government. And that's his whole life. He's been born to think that. But he's not even, this is crazy, right? This what's next is the Joint Chiefs of Staff going to be headed by some sort of anti-Castro Cuban nationalist? That's probably what kind of Secretary Marco Rubio is. So this is crazy. It's someone like this. His father, Quan Cao, from Quang Tri province. Sorry, the Vietnamese is not very good. Although I have visited their beautiful country now that, all the bad people are out. Worked in that being us and our collaborationists. Worked in South Vietnam's Ministry of Agriculture and was assistant to the Deputy Prime Minister. So this dude he's a son of a high-level collaborationist who worked with the Americans and probably the French before to destroy parts of the national liberation struggle of his own country. So basically a traitor getting poached, his son getting poached to the people who were making them a proxy to destroy their own nation. And now he's an American, and he's going to be a traitor for his own nation again. Very funny, very funny. This is how this works. Quan Cao had been an international student in the Philippines. Philippines always, that's, America, Asia base number one, pretty much. Except for Japan, I guess. Student in the Philippines, having been granted a scholarship from the Rockefeller Foundation. Oh, very good. Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. So I don't know what's happened in his head. I don't know if he's got MK Ultra or, the Ford, Rockefeller, whatever spooky dooky, freaky deaky shit they do, they've done to him. So he's a believer for life. Before earning a PhD at Cornell University. Let's go. These are just the ghoulish places. You just got to admit, people in America think, wow, you went to Cornell. Rockefeller, ooh, fancy, ooh, He's just getting brainwashed to, hate and kill everything, basically. In 1975, at age 4, Hung Cao went to the United States with his family as refugees. Oh, he got out. That's great. That's great. He got out. This horrible place that we were destroying thanks to his family. Cao spent some time in his childhood living in Niger, where his father served as an agriculture specialist for USAID. Oh, great! It just keeps getting worse. The CIA cutout, USAID. These are the people that this guy comes from. He returned to the U.S. at age 12 and was a student of the first graduating class of Thomas and Jefferson High School Science and Technology, and now he's in Virginia, in Fairfax County, Virginia. Nice. It's just a whammy. This is like the lacrosse shirt, the Blue Lives Matter lacrosse shirt. It's the more you look at it, it's the more oh God, he did what? Oh, and he did where? And he did with who? And oh God, this is a horrible person. This is a horrible person. The red flags are going up left and right. Jesus Christ. Cal entered the U.S. Navy as a seaman recruit in 1989 and graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1996 with a bachelor's degree in ocean engineering. Wow, very cool. Specialist in ordnance disposal and salvage diving. He led the Navy team on the USNS Grasp that recovered the bodies of John F. Kennedy Jr. and his wife Carolyn Bessette and sister-in-law Lauren Bessette in their 1999 crash off of Martha's Vineyard. Definitely not any weird deep state stuff going on there. Don't worry about it. I haven't even gone down that rabbit hole, but it's just screaming at me. It's just screaming, you know. 2008, he received a Master's of Science in Applied Physics in Naval Postgraduate School. As an explosives ordnance disposal diving specialist with the Navy, Cal and his family relocated multiple times for assignments. During his final major operational tour in the Navy, Cal lived near the Naval Support Activity Panama City, September, while he served as commanding officer of the Naval Diving and Salvage Training Center there, who's moved to the Pentagon on assignment in Washington, D.C. There, you know, he's at Pentagon, moving up. All his old deep state ties are, you know, coming home and helping him, you know, getting the chain sent up the chain for him. This guy's good. His dad, USAID, good shit. He did good shit in Niger, you know. Cal spent over 30 years in active duty in the Navy, retiring as a captain in October 2021. His military career encompassed operational deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia. All nice places where we did all great things. All great stuff. All places that are thriving right now. Cal earned the Command Ashore Badge, the Navy Diving Officer Badge, and Explosive Ordnance Disposal Warfare Officer's Badge. Cal was a vice president, and this is a real interesting one. Cal was a vice president of CACI, a U.S. government contractor that provides services to defense, intelligence, and homeland security agencies. Let's go look at this. CACI International Inc., originally California Analysis Center Inc., then Consolidated Analysis Center Inc., often known as CACI, I don't know, whatever, is an American multinational professional services and information technology company headquartered in Northern Virginia, of course. CACI provides services to many branches of the U.S. Federal government, including defense, homeland security, and intelligence. Has approximately 27,000 employees worldwide. Is a member of the Fortune 500 largest companies, the Russell 1000 Index, and the S&P Mid-Cap 400 Index. So, to wrap it all up, this guy's probably just going to be making money off of this. He's probably just going to be garnering information that he can pass on to his military. And what is his role there? What is his role? Vice President of CACI. That's pretty big. A U.S. contractor to provide services and defense. You don't think he's going to go back there, do you? Could he do that? Could he go back there and make money off of all the connections and people he's met and all the information he's gathered? You don't think that's going to happen? You don't think he's going to be giving contract to his own people that are friends with him? I mean, it's just a scam at the end of the day. That's everything in America is literally just a scam. It's either a real estate scam or some finance scam, some crypto thing. It's just a scam. I mean, this is the caliber. This is the type of person who's now acting Secretary of the Navy. You think this guy's gonna say no to what Trump says? Come on, I'd be very surprised. I hope he does, but I don't know, man. America's full of these ghouls, these goons. Hung cow. I mean, Jesus Christ. So that's the caliber of person we have. That's the caliber of person that we have in our corner. And it's getting... Speaking of the Navy, let's look at this. So, as you may have remembered from our last episode, I did predict that we were going to interdict Chinese ships and sort of an ensuing Chinese naval battle may happen. That didn't fully come to fruition, but what did happen is a ship by the name of the Touska, a cargo ship confirmed from the Gaolan port from Zhuhai, China. This is per Kepler AIS data and previous Washington Post reporting, because they've been following this ship apparently. Galvan is a known loading port for sodium perchlorate, the primary oxidizer and solid rocket fuel for Iranian ballistic missiles. So the State Department has designated it preferred shipping line for Iranian. Blah, blah, blah. They're accused of procuring material for Iran ballistic missiles program. Note that they actually don't know if it did do that, because I'm sure Galvan port in Zhuhai, China is probably ships a lot of fucking things. So they're just grasping at straws here probably, but very well could have been. So an Iranian vessel that they took over, but from a Chinese port. And a shipping lane basically from China to Iran being attacked, Not an attack, doing piracy. This is illegal. It's not a war. It's not warfare. This is piracy. So this is crazy. I mean, we basically interdicted this vessel because we thought China was selling them fuel for their ballistic missile program, which brings me to a point that I think, I don't know if we said on a show before, but there's two components of the Iran war. There is the religious, insano, unconscious, I hate that dude because he is him and everything that I'm not, I hate Iran because they stand for everything that we aren't, anti-imperialist, revolutionary, pious, religious, and they stand to destroy, and refute, our culture of genocide and destruction, especially the Palestinian people and the Middle Eastern people, Arab people, more generally, people in general. They stand for life and we stand for death and destruction. So I hate them. And there's also the hard geopolitical component to it. The multipolarity, the Iran being the center of all trade networks over the Eurasian land bridge to everything from Asia to Africa to Europe. And I think more and more as the fanaticism, especially from Israel, starts to cool off, it's not cooling off, but they're getting drowned out by reality of economic and political forces. We start to realize, and I mean we've known this, me and Hannah, but this war in Iran, this war with Ukraine, arming Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, peeling India off, pairing them with Israel, with the West, more generally, from BRICS. This is all a build-up to a war with China at the end of the day, even the war in Afghanistan. This is all in preparation to take out the real near-peer competitor. Not near in the sense of geography, near in the sense of economically. And I say near because their GDPs are, the gap is closing between us and them, but our GDP is fake and their GDP is real. So in all, for all intents and sakes and purposes, like China actually has already overtaken America. And I think that's why they're freaking out. I think that's why they're freaking out because they've realized this much too late, which is interesting because we invested in them. We made them who they are, But with the Iran war, the timing may also have been about the North-South corridor, which connects India, Iran, Russia, and the East-West corridor, which connects China through the middle of Iran to the rest of Europe and also Africa, which were on track to be completed. I mean, they were pretty much just about to be completed right before the Iran war happened. So the timing of that is very suspicious. And not only were we bombing schools and hospitals and civilian infrastructure and politicians, public figures, and civilians more generally. We're also bombing what? Infrastructure, right? So that means roads, bridges, railways. All things that China needs to ship overland what could be interdicted in the sea, i.e. to Touska, right? So if they can have those shipping lines overland be protected, then it's going to be hard for America to get over there with the ship. They can't. It's on land. So they'd have to come with an air force and an army, which means moving all their people overland or through there, which is harder to do than it is to sail a huge boat. So in the vast oceans, right, which you can retreat very easily from. So you can't retreat very easily in the middle of the Iranian mountains. You can't. That's why we lost all these wars in West Asia, in the Middle East. It's hard. It's a hard landscape. It's where empires go to die, famously, is what people say. So I think America is getting more and more frenetic because they're starting to realize someone who has postponed writing a paper, and that in the past they have procrastinated and pulled it out their ass in the end. I have 1-2 days. I gotta write this 15-page paper. But now it's getting down to the wire, and they've got 3 or 4 hours to write a 15-page paper, and they don't have, and ChatGPT is not gonna work for them, and they don't have the time, and they're more and more realizing this, how behind they actually are, because they didn't even realize it. And so they're getting more and more frenetic and more outlandish with their Hail Mary passes to try and make something change, make something work, to the point where now they've just paused the conflict, and they're moving forces, in the Arabian Sea, and they're moving forces over air and sea to do something, but they don't know what. That's why they're pausing, But they want to do some blow, but like they did in Ukraine, every time they negotiate, they're just rearming so they could do some other terrorist attack. But now it's gotten to the point where, what can they do? And so they're getting increasingly more desperate, and they don't know what to do. And China is becoming more and more of a power here. The petro yuan is now solidified. I think that's a new normal. I don't think that's going to go away. It's not going to go away. The Strait of Hormuz being owned and controlled by Iran and maybe Oman in the future, that's not going to go away. All these American bases being rendered obsolete, that's not going to go away. They're not going to come back. That's not going to happen. Some of Iran's sanctions being lifted, that probably won't go away too, because the oil price is going to continue. So they're going to need that oil. So all these things are just the new normal. I mean, there is no going back now. And so they're getting more and more frenetic because of that. And they're realizing how much of a better position China is in that they are in. And it's only just starting to dawn on them, but it's already too late. So what do you do? Let's look at this article. This is big. Deutsche Bank, European bank, famous for criminal Western activity, but even they successfully issued record-breaking 5.5 billion renminbi Panda-bond. Okay, so not only, this is really bad. Not only is China the most developed industrial power in the world, they're the biggest trading partner of pretty much every country. Not only do they now have one of the largest navies by vessel count, not only do they have one of the largest populations of any country, not only are they one of the most educated, not only are they one of the most educated populations, one of the highest rate of middle class in their population. Not only are people buying oil in yuan, not only are they brokering diplomatic deals left and right that America could never do, not only are they developing the world, not only that, people in Europe now, of the financial Western class, are itching. They're itching. They're chomping at the bit to buy Chinese bonds, not American bonds, not Euro bonds, Chinese bonds. Yuan, renminbi. Ooh, that's not good. That's really not good. I mean, that's not good for Europe and the West, but it's really not good for America. Because, and we've said this time and time again, once the American bond market collapses, that is the end of American hegemony. Because in order for our country to function, in order for us to finance our wars, which are not paid out in cash, they're financed, we have to get paid by other countries. Other countries finance our budget, our $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget or whatever it's going to be. They finance it. We spend it before we have it. And money comes in by people purchasing our bonds for our U.S. treasuries. Oh, but why do they do that? Everyone around the world hates us. Why would they purchase our bonds? Because they need U.S. dollars to purchase oil, to do international settlements, to trade from international bank to international bank. Everyone thinks they need dollars. Well, what happens when the U.S. bond market is now not as competitive as the yuan bond market, the renminbi bond market? What happens when, the U.S. bonds and treasuries, that used to be the most, the safest investment you could make? What happens when it's no longer viewed as that safe of an investment? What happens when the Panda-bonds are now the safest investment around the world? And what happens when it's so enticing for people that even the capitalists who aren't dependent necessarily on the U.S. bond markets go, we have to buy this because it's just going to make so much more money for us. I mean, what happens then? The capitalist class would be self-defeating because of that. And that's quickly becoming a reality. I mean, who would have predicted petro-yuan would happen within 44 days of the first attack on Iran? Sorry, I shouldn't say the first attack, one of many attacks, but the first attack since the 12-day war and the ensuing calming down, whatever, negotiation period, ceasefires. Who would have assumed that? I mean, so quickly these things happened. They were set in motion so quickly because they've been planning them for a long time. But if the West and Israel and America didn't attack Iran, that would have never happened, but it would have taken decades, maybe centuries. So we're accelerating our decline by trying to preempt it. It's funny because it's sort of like some Greco-Roman tragedy, it's sort of like America's been told that, you'll kill your father and fuck your mother. This this sort of prophecy that Israel will fall and China will rise, and this prophecy, which seems so outlandish, it seems so like it could never happen to American hegemony. The more and more they try to preempt that from not happening, the more and more they try to go, well, we just need to do this huge, awe-inspiring show of force. The faster and faster they accelerate their demise. So it's funny. It's really funny. It's like some guy saying, like, hey, you got to watch out. I feel like your girl, she might be cheating on you, And then the guy gets so jealous, and he's coming up with all these scenarios in his head, and he's going insane, and he's driving his girl away from him. And then next thing you know, she wouldn't have done it, but now she's cheating on him, It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's this Ouroboros cycle, And that's what's happening with America right now. It's like the best thing we can do right now is to stop everything. Just stop everything. Pull out, leave, make some PR thing. That's our best case scenario. I was thinking maybe with the ceasefire and the fact that oil, went up, Brent crude went up to like 100 plus a barrel, and the bond market started to, go crazy, that Trump, with his negotiations, saw that, and he said, okay, we can't, or the buck has to stop here. We're going, it's getting out of hand. But if the allegations of the Raising Cain thing are to be believed, then he thought, no, fuck it, we'll go to nuclear war. We'll keep doing it. We'll keep escalating. It's like this is only what these people know how to do, is escalate, is show force. And so it's sort of like a toxic ex. It's like even when you break up with them, all they know how to do is be toxic. So they'll start calling you. They'll try to fuck your friend, try to rope you back. Instead of having this like, oh, I'm a toxic ex. Maybe I need to like reevaluate my life and rechange things, No, they're like narcissistic psychopaths. Even when their whole life is destroyed, and they know it consciously, and they maybe even consciously know that they have to change, their whole life has been lived by these actions, this lifestyle. That's how they symbolize themselves mentally. So old habits die hard. That's just what I'll say. Maybe I'll just start to wrap it up with that. Like, if you base your culture on a warrior like status, to go around the world and to dominate and domineer over everyone, and you come to a point where you've overextended yourself, and the more and more you try to dominate people, the more and more they end up coming together to rebuff you. Are you going to sit there and say, you know what, I need to reflect on this, and I need to become a pacifist, I need to become, I need to cut myself off from the rest of the world, I need to focus on myself, I need to do, I need to be isolationist, and we need to reestablish, our base of political autonomy at home, which is insulated from a lot of the world. No, they're not going to do that. If they were going to do that, they would have done it years ago. That's not how these people are. So they only know one way to operate, It's like me with skating. Like, I broke my ankle skating last year, and I was like, I might have to give up skating. Like, I really loved it. That's how I made all my friends. That's how I got into making art and videos, and even organizing and just meeting people, and getting active and being outside and traversing the city. It's like how I got around. It's so ingrained in me, that's how I function in society, is like as a street skater, for better or worse. But now it's getting to the point where I have a compulsion to do it, because that's how I've I've built my life around doing that in a way. And when it physically hurts you, like the other day I was like, fuck, I really want to skate. I went skating, just skated some flat, and I fell, and it was it bummed me out, but I had a good session still. But it's at what point can you keep doing that, when it's it's kind of physically bad for you. I get injured, I'm getting older, I'm getting injured more, but the only way you've traveled, made friends, made art, has been through that action. It's going to be very hard for you to give that up, especially in lieu of replacing it with something, dropping something else in. For you to just give that up and be like, all right, I have to stop and I have to rethink and I have to find, most people won't do that. They won't. I'm struggling with it right now, As an American, I struggle with this all the time. Being an American, period. I mean, sometimes I think, should I just leave this country? If we really are to believe, like me and Conrad were saying before, America, is it really different than Israel? Not really, no. No, it might be worse than Israel, in a lot of ways. Israel is an aberration. America's been a large country around all the places. Africa, South America, Asia, Eurasia, Europe. And they've been doing horrible things. Israeli-like things all over the place for years. And Israel wouldn't exist without us. They wouldn't be what they are without us. We all know Israel's so horrible. If we were born there, we'd think I would just leave. I could never do that. I could never be a part of that. I would have to, make it part of my life story to leave and abdicate that and do something else, or join the Palestinians and do that. But that's an American. Well, doesn't that apply for us? At least doubly fold. Does it even make sense to be an American? To have pride in America right now? Half the time me and Conrad joke about just leaving, going to Russia, joining the Russian military. I mean, at least our life would have meaning and we'd be fighting for something then. I mean, what does it even mean to be an American now? It doesn't mean anything. It means less than nothing. And it's going to be hard for us soon enough. The way Israelis are treated out in the world, that's how it's going to be for us. We're going to go to Argentina, Patagonia, and they're going to be like, you and the Israelis destroyed this country, and you need to get the fuck out of here. You're going to be like, oh, shit, okay, yeah. And then we're going to go to, like, Panama or something, and they're going to be like, you Americans destroyed this country, and you need to get the fuck out. And you're like, well, sorry. I mean, it wasn't me. It was, but okay, yeah. And then we're going to go to Mexico City, and they're going to be like, you funded the cartels, and you destroyed this country. And we're just going to be like, fuck. Shit, man. Fucking shit, it happens in a lot of places already. So, I don't know. Long story short, I don't know how to symbolize being an American, because it's going to stay here, for a while. That's the thing. Israel can leave. It can be destroyed. West Asia has a lot of nations that don't make sense. The borders will be rewritten. They'll be wiped away with the sands of time. They'll be subsumed by other countries. America, I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. I don't foresee Mexico or Canada invading America and annexing a lot of it. So we'll be here. So we have to contend with what we've done and what we will do. And if you look at a place like Germany, it hasn't really worked out very well for them. That's not been very good for them mentally, So what's going to happen here? I don't know. Civil war? I don't know. What is the average American to do? It's hard to say. What's the right thing to do? Do we flee this country? Try to marry some Chinese lady, Try to join the Russian military, Go down to Brazil, who's to say? Do we stay here? Try to have some sort of armed faction of a militia take over some local government and create an autonomous zone and have a, civil war or something? I don't know. Or do we do what's unfortunately maybe most likely is we sit here on our phones, our computer screens, looking at the things disintegrate over time, slowly but surely. Like the UK since the 70s, since their Suez. And wake up one day and go, how the fuck did we get here? With all this control and all this technological feudalism that we don't know how to break out of. That's maybe the worst scenario in a way. And I'm not sure. It's unfortunate to say I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm not sure, But these next 3 weeks, and I know we've been doing predictions, it's hard to say what's going to happen next, because it could be that long drop off, or it could be the next 3 weeks. It could be they make their move, There are pretty much, 3 different things that could happen. Trump totally capitulates, which, like, in a justified world is what would happen, But we don't live in a just world, so to be honest, I don't really see that happening. Where he just signs all the capitulation and just leaves. He does that, he launches some sort of other new Hail Mary attack, which will reignite the war, which, to be honest, I do believe is going to happen. I think it's totally irrational, totally insane, and totally strategically misguided, but they're moving forces there. When you take a gun out and you load it and you cock it back and you point it at someone, you're most likely going to shoot. If you're going to negotiate, you do the opposite. You uncock it, you unload it, and you put the gun down, you start talking. If you're talking and you're going, yeah, no, what's going to happen next? Next is you shoot. And that's what's happening now. They're moving all these forces there. They have the blockade there. They're waiting, they're baiting their time so they can come up with something, anything. And the only reason that we're in this momentary ceasefire at all, the only reason that we have this momentary economic, lull, because we haven't had famine yet, is because they're expending all their munitions and all of our strategic oil reserves are being drained right now, so that we can have peace? No, come up with another way to destroy Iran, which won't work. And they're running out of options. That's why it's taking so long. So I predict that that's what's going to happen. The other thing that could happen, which would maybe be the smartest thing for Trump, which I think some analysts have been positing, is that maybe the Trump noise machine starts to happen. The strategic ambiguity starts to drown out the reality, basically. And that what I mean by that is Trump continues to do weird, frenetic things that don't really make a difference to the Iran war and aren't necessarily hard kinetic strikes against the Iranian state. So the Iranian state won't restart the war, but they'll be positioned as things that, like, Trump is doing, like, oh, we took some tanker, or oh, we moved into the Strait of Malacca, and we're going to be working with whatever, Philippines and Malaysia and Indonesia, and to do this, and that's going to be a win against China. And he's just going to keep talking and doing random things until we just get further and further away. Sort of like what happened with Epstein. That's what this whole part of this is too. Is just, don't look at that. Don't look at the criminal syndicate of people around the world getting charged, because I don't want to get charged, go to jail, and get a firing squad, which is what should happen. But don't look at that, But look at all these other random things that we're doing that will keep you talking but don't really make a difference at the end of the day. And then it'll be maybe a year or two out, and the new normal, which is Iran holds Strait of Hormuz, sell oil and petro yuan and rial, and there's no more American bases in the Middle East, and Israel is slowly collapsing, and sanctions largely on oil exports from Iran have been lifted. That just stays, and it will become a tacit surrender, but not one that is publicized. And Iran will say, we won't reignite this because we know secretly you don't want to, because you can't, because you'll be defeated. But since you're not going to say that, because that'd be a huge defeat, a public defeat for you, we'll keep up this charade going, And then people will forget about it, because then we'll be in the Strait of Malacca. And then next thing you know, we'll be at war with Taiwan. And that's the real death knell if that happens, But now it's like everywhere you look, there's death knells. So I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I do think in 3 weeks, whatever their Hail Mary is will happen. I think they'll launch some sort of air strike from the sea on Iran to try and strategically take out something that won't make a difference. And Iran will respond with maximum pressure. They'll probably have Ansar Allah close the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. They'll fully close Strait of Hormuz. They'll take out even more assets, and they probably will strike Israel even harder, because they've actually been focusing more on the Gulf states because of the oil production and the bases there. And they'll strike Israel even harder than they've ever been struck. especially because they've been rearming too. Iran's been rearming. It's not just America that's been rearming. And we haven't been making things. Iran's continuing to make things. We're just stealing stuff away from Indo-PACOM and SOCOM and AFRICOM. We're just going, oh, but what's still left? Can we move it here? So that's all we have done. But Iran has been making stuff in their underground bunkers, and they've been making missiles. And so they're probably ready to go, all right, we'll flatten a large part of Haifa, when you do that. And we'll close off Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and we'll close off Strait of Hormuz, and we're, like what the Americans said, we'll make the economy scream. And it's not just going to be the Americans. It'll be everyone around the world. And that's when, that's when the craziness really starts. That's when the new COVID will look like T-ball when what happens. It'll be rationing. It'll be stay-at-home orders. It'll be no car usage. It'll be a lot of things. Except the only essential things, will be happening, which will probably be food. If that, which is a scary thought because we might not have fertilizers here. A lot of our farming is highly conventional based on ammonium phosphate. So if we don't have that, if we don't have petrochemical derived fertilizers, a lot of people aren't going to plant. A lot of people don't plant, then we don't have food. And we can't import food because all the international shipping lanes are filled with piracy and naval battles. So good luck, everyone. I really dearly hope, well, part of me actually wants that to happen so that America can feel the pain and change, actually make a difference. But I do sincerely hope that we don't all get famine and die, but I think that's what will happen. Brent crude already spiked back up to $120, recently. I don't see that stopping. Even if Trump does the talk and get just further and further away of this conflict without really actually making a decision on it and just kind of leaving it as it is right now, which would be a better outcome in a way. Even if we do that, we still have a huge oil shortage because we've destroyed a lot of Iran's capacity and they've destroyed a lot of the Gulf's capacity to produce oil. And now our strategic reserves are gone. So oil and gas, liquefied natural gas, it's going to be $4, $5, $6, $7, $8. Everything's going to be extremely expensive. And so even that will create a rippling effect. I mean, the economy may collapse just off of that. So gas going up $1 or $2 more could tank the economy. So it may not even matter, but it's degrees of apocalypse now, of doom that we're talking about. And I just hope to predict this. Part of the thing about COVID was that me and Conrad, I think we were we're not going to make predictions anymore because we thought Bernie was going to be president. We thought we'd reform America, some social democracy wave take over, and nobody, people predicted COVID, let's just be honest. We had no clue about the depths of Jeffrey Epstein and COVID, stuff like that. Ralph Barrick at UNC Chapel Hill, Ghislaine Maxwell, the real depths of political, I don't even know what you'd call it. Reality, unfortunately, but it seemed like, at that time, oh, that's just weird, crazy QAnon people, conspiracy theory stuff, And we already knew 9/11 was an inside job, but we didn't know that, Jeffrey Epstein, was running a lot of America and is a guy that, rapes and eats children and has a breeding program in New Mexico. We didn't fathom that as a real discrete thing in political life until it breached, containment out of just circles of people gossiping about it and, FBI witness statements into oh, he's getting indicted. wait, who is this dude? Oh, there's a worldwide pandemic, and there's a spike protein on it on the furin cleavage site, which can't happen in nature. What's going on, right? So until it breaches containment and it goes viral, literally and figuratively, right? Jeffrey Epstein went viral. It's hard for people to suppress all the talk about that, even now. Now it's a meme, right? The Epstein syndicate, the Epstein class. That's something now that's in our vernacular now. That's something we will talk about, theoretically for years to come, not just gossip about, right? Same with COVID. It literally went viral. Something science will be talking about for a long time now. So you can't put the cat back in the bag, You can't be like, oh, the U.S. government creates bioweapons and be like, you're crazy. It's like, well, what do you think 2 years of the whole world being shut down was? So we're at that point now. We're at an inflection point, and I just think God bless everybody. I hope everyone can, find some silver lining to come out on top somehow that isn't, part of the Epstein syndicate, and that those people go down. But it's hard to be, sort of optimistic. But America's failing, and that's good. At the end of the day, that'll be good for everyone. China's rising. That's what needs to happen. BRICS needs to realign and rise, and hopefully that's happening. Hopefully the yuan surpasses the dollar and replaces it. And, one day when I'm 63, my children are speaking Mandarin. My grandchildren. If I have grandchildren. If I am alive. If I can survive, But that's my hope, That's my hope. Because right now it's not looking good for us in the West, So I just hope that us going down means, and surely it will, in the long term at least, will mean the success of pretty much everyone else, because we will run this country, and Israel and Europe need to be held to account, and they need to be out of power, and they need to become irrelevant. They need it. They need to, for the sake of humanity. Because if that General Kane story is to be believed, we're getting very close to nuclear warfare, and that's scary. So, that's my prediction, I guess. I don't know, it's sort of a vague prediction, but that's kind of been the whole running prediction through the show. I don't know if I should give a more concise one. I don't know if I really have one right now. I do believe America will do a Hail Mary attack, basically. I think that's I'm in the Brian Berletic camp, I think, with that. I think that will happen. And I predict, I think Conrad predicted this, but some false flags will probably happen. Some shootings, the ballroom shooting. Who even believes this shit anymore? They're getting worse and worse at this stuff. So more stuff like that will continue to happen. They'll be blaming it on Iran or Yemen or China. I don't know who's next. Indonesia, whatever. Whatever's next, they'll be blaming it on them. So, all right, everybody. That's been episode. I can't remember what episode this is. 8 or 9. Talk to you guys later. Peace.